director here at Elevator. If you have not been here before, we are a very medical place. We help you with anything from shipping, logistics, storage solutions, improvements on marketing, and capital. The magic here is endless, so if you have any questions or like to have a tour, be sure to find one of us with an Elevator shirt and we'll be happy to give you a tour after. Let's see. So the purpose of our Lunch and Learn is to provide you with tactics to implement once you leave, better understanding, and the power of community encourage you to meet with someone you don't know. So be sure to go ahead and make a friend today, and then come back next week for Wednesday and Thursday for our free co-working days. We'd like to give a huge shout out to Marigold 111 for sponsoring the event, and of course for yummy sandwiches and such. But to get started, we'd like to give a very warm welcome to our valued member here at Elevator, Drew Davies with Oxide, as he tells you more about marketing and brand awareness.
Thank you, Emily. I can wholeheartedly confirm that it's magic here. I work in an office with Dan Gilbert just upstairs. We get to watch magic happen all throughout the building every day. Come on back and join us if you're a guest here to the building. Thanks a bunch to Josh for getting all this set up. Thanks to the Elevator team for making all of this happen. I know there's a whole bunch of people involved behind the scenes to sort of make these things seem relatively seamless as they go. Thanks to Marigold 111 for sponsoring this room and this lunch and this event and untold other magical things as well. Thank you to all of you for taking a little bit of time out of your Tuesday to join me here. I'll try and make this as valuable as I can for you. I will note there's some space for Q&A at the end, God willing. And so if you have some questions, write them down, keep them in your brain, and shout them out later when we get to the end. Quick overview of what we're doing today. Presentation is technically called Crafting Your Brand. Good design is good business. I think all the signs say building your brand, whatnot, all of those things are appropriate. We're here to do a top-level overview of branding in general. Who, what, where, how, when, why, whatever W's and H's are left over. Don't worry, you will see all of them in this presentation. It is designed for people that are relatively new to branding or relatively new to starting a company, being a founder and entrepreneur, signing on to a branding position. So it will be relatively high level and a kind of smorgasbord of details across various different categories, but hopefully there's a little bit of value in some of those parts for all of you, no matter what your background is, come from. Real quick, I am Drew Davies. I am the founder and brand consultant at Oxide Design. You may recognize our sign from our former location down in the Blackstone that now hangs on the outside of Bar 39. Check that place out if you're the kind of person that stays out after 11 p.m. I hear tell that it's quite hopping late at night. We don't go out then, so it doesn't matter. Oxide, I founded it almost 25 years ago. It is now what I call the civic-minded brand and design consultancy of Drew Davies. That is because I now am the independent brand consultant. I used to have a team of a variety of designers, and now I've moved on to doing my work as an individual so that I can be a little more selective about my clients and really dig in with them and work as kind of a team member alongside of those clients. I have a long history of branding and design for a whole bunch of retail and consumer packages, but as you can tell from the description that I'm now using, a lot of community organizations, civic-minded organizations, and I'm steering a lot of my work in that direction. In my world, branding applies to all of those things. So we've gotten to do work along the way for Sarah Craft Cider. Hopefully you've seen them move from Lincoln here into the Omaha space. Rebranded Metro Transit System about 15 years ago. Got some exciting craft beer projects. This is for Cave Creek out of Glenwood, Iowa. One of their special releases that we actually designed and printed an old-timey newspaper and wrapped all the bottles in. Branding. I've got to name, do the logo for, and all the ongoing branding and communication work for Kiewit Luminarium. And work with other out-of-state people like Locavores. This is a fast casual healthy alternative restaurant based out of Alameda, Colorado. Now that I've proven to you that I'm at least moderately qualified to be standing in front of you and talk about branding. Oh, yeah, sorry. Forgot this slide was in here. I also designed this license plate. So if you love it, tell me later. And if you hate it, post that online somewhere all about how terrible it is. Real quick, all of you probably know showing up here to a branding endeavor that you don't even know exactly if someone asks you what the definition of branding is. I get 1 million calls a week for someone saying, I'd like you to do branding for us. And they mean 1 million different things in each of those cases. So I'm going to give us a foundation to start from real quick here on brand. At its highest level, brand, this idea is known in the industry, at least, as this total sum of the public's perception of you, right? So it includes all of the stuff you do, your logo and your name and your whatnot, the packaging you put out to the world, the marketing you put out, but it also includes lots of things that you have less control over, but you can influence a bit. PR and crisis comms and how do your people greet people at the front door and what's your returns process like, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's brand. What we're going to talk about today is branding. So informally, I'm going to narrow that scope down a little bit to what we'll call the visual representation of your brand in the public. Even that's not quite accurate, because we're going to talk a little bit about verbal presentation of your brand in the public today too, but this idea about the tangible piece that we're in control of. What is it that we should say? I would tell you that good branding is 3 things. True to the core of your company, absolutely accurate about who you are, deep down on the inside. Consistent. I like telling people that the worst logo in the world used consistently is way more valuable than the world's best logo used sort of haphazardly and slapdashed around. And then clear. That is specifically communicating what's unique about you and what you are. Why? I told you I was going to go through all of these. You will see slides that say who, what, when, where, and why by the time we're done here. Oh, and how? We're going to get that one. Why is branding important and valuable? You're here, so you have a good sense that branding is important and valuable in general. I hope that's why you came, although free lunch, always a good reason to come anyway. The idea is really whatever it is that your company does, even whether you're new or well-established, like doing that thing well, that's table stakes, right? Of course you're super good at the thing you're doing. That's the whole point. Well, everybody's super good at the thing they're doing. So the idea about branding being valuable is to kind of step you out of that, distinguish yourself, tell your story in a compelling way that gets you to rise above the fray of everyone else who's also doing a great job offering the kinds of products and services. I, in the past, have done a lot of talks with craft beverage and food packaging, so some of my examples we'll see in here are related to that industry. But this just makes my point. Back in 2017, the Brewers Association determined that literally every day of the year there was a new craft brewery opening across the United States, 1 per day across the United States. That is to reiterate the idea that there are plenty of people in competition with you. No matter what your space is, you don't have to be a craft brewery to have plenty of competition.
It's like church. It's a good problem to have.
Welcome. With more people in front, it's even harder for me not to walk over to that whiteboard and write Econ 101, Mr. Davies on that. It's taken me everything I have not to go over there. Oh, it's true. I probably don't need to tell you. Still, buyers judge every book by its cover. So, in that craft food and beverage industry, typical food buyer, they found out through research, 70% of the time they don't make a decision about what they're buying off the shelf until they get to the store and they're standing in front of all of it. Right? So they haven't researched it, they haven't thought it through. They get to the store and all those beer brands are in front of them. That's when they're like, that one. Great, because it's spoke to them. So it's imperative for you to use branding to steal the spotlight, to stand out from that space, right? To make a compelling case for who you are. People aren't taking the time to dig in and research on that. They're deciding immediately when they encounter your brand whether or not it resonates with them. A couple more stats that relate to packaged goods but are still true across essentially every industry in their concept is the influencers that cause people to make the decisions they do about what things they buy, right? So this is Nielsen's craft beer audit from 2016. That feels like a lifetime ago now. But the top 3 reasons people gave for the choices they made to buy, in this case, a craft beer, but quite frankly, these could apply to almost any industry any of you are in. Logo or branding, already pretty high at 39. Actually, information about where the product's produced, 43. And 48% of the time, literally the design of the label or packaging. So this is where all that brand shines through about influencing their decisions. They didn't research this. They weren't worried about what kind of alcohol volume percentage, bottle color, et cetera, et cetera. That branding is what made them make that decision most often. So to finish out our why, I would tell you the good brand gives you 3 great things. One of them, bags of money. A strong brand does actually have dollars and cents value. To take it sort of up to the top level of companies, in 1980, essentially all the assets, all the value of an average S&P 500 company was measured in tangible assets. So, furniture, inventory, et cetera, et cetera. By 2010, an average off of the S&P 500, tangible assets only account for 1/3 of the value of that company. And in many cases, another 1/3 of the value of that company is measured as its brand, just its brand alone. So in a lot of cases in the S&P 500, brand is the single most valuable asset those companies have on their books. So if you needed one more reason, branding is actually valuable in dollars. But I would tell you, a good brand actually also gives your company great direction. So this is about growth, but in a different way. You can use great brand and the kind of brand we'll talk about a little bit later today to align your leadership and your employees around a solid reason for being, the reason your company exists, and guide your decisions with that. So use that to keep your company on track in terms of what your original vision was and staying true to who you are. So global consultants McKinsey found that companies with a clear narrative that's distributed to employees and leadership actually perform 20% better than companies that don't. And absolutely, it's not quite bags of money, but a good brand eases growth for a company, right? So trusted brand allows you to charge more for your products. A trusted brand allows you to have an easier time getting into additional distribution channels, moving your products into other spaces, starting to talk to different audiences. And a well-respected brand has easier time launching new products, opening new locations. If you're wondering about when you should engage in branding, and you're sitting here, I'm glad you're here in the room, because as you might have suspected, the answer is absolutely immediately. I would tell you, I'm a little biased, that you need to have a strong brand in place as soon as possible. So it's easy for me to say, but as the saying goes, you rarely get a second chance to make a first impression. So whatever brand you're working with right now, that's the impression you're already building in your customers' minds. So if it's not accurate to who you are, it's not clear, then it's essentially doing you damage and digging a hole deeper that you're going to have to dig your way out of when you develop a brand that's actually accurate to who you are. So I would tell you, even for the companies that are well established, you are still making first impressions with new customers every day. So you may have been around for 10, 20, 40 years. There's still new customers that are encountering you for the first time. And it behooves you to make sure your brand is accurate when they get there. If people have a bad experience with your brand before they even get to whether or not they have a good experience with your product or service, this comes at a level way before that. You'll have to work twice as hard to take them out of that. So if you've got a secret formula that wins every time, branding is like a new layer of a secret formula on top of that. You want to make sure that works, gets them into your product or service, and then your uniqueness can shine through. All right. Here comes the fun, exciting take-home quiz part of today's session. You do not need to do anything with the handouts that are in front of you. You can use them as a reference for here, but because Josh would not let me have 4 hours today, we're not going to go through this exercise all together, but it would be kind of fun to do that, actually. So that sheet is a take-home cheat sheet, so you can certainly take notes as we go, but that'll help remind you about kind of where we've been as you go home and you want to walk through this process. Because what I do want to do is, true to the Lunch and Learn series here, give you a little bit of take-home work you can do that actually moves the ball forward in terms of giving you some actual, not just platitudes, but real things that can help. There's two main sections of really foundational core work we can do on your brand. And you can do this absolutely on your own. You and whoever your partners or founders or trusted advisors are in your company can take both of these processes home. And basically what we're doing here is establishing the foundation of your brand. Point you in all the right directions. The first one is about working through a quick process to define your core values. So this sounds super easy. As you can imagine, it never really is. But I'll give you the basic steps for it and tell you that I have simplified it just a bit here in this presentation to make it sound like it's a really clean, easy, slick, fun process. But of course, typically it involves some wrangling, right? Especially if there's a couple, 2, 3 of you as founders or trusted advisors or whatnot. You have to work through some of these. But this is a project worth diving into and really skipping past the fact that it seems on the surface like it might be simple, and instead imagining it's time to really kind of dig into the hard work on those core values. So step one on those is this brainstorming process, right?
So on the subject of core values, what would be one of the core values of Offset?
Say again?
What would be one of your core values for Offset?
Clarity.
Clarity.
Yep. It's maybe our one core value. Hopefully that shines through in this presentation. This brainstorming process is about sort of a, no bad ideas in brainstorming, except, sorry, there are some bad ideas here. What you want to do is write down all kinds of adjectives, single word adjectives that describe who you are at your core. What's the deep thing that's driving you? This can be 20, 30, 50, 100, 200 adjectives. The idea is get them all out, but make sure that the things you're writing down really do feel like, yeah, that's where we're coming from. All right, now I'll explain in a little more detail about what I mean on that in a second. The second part of that process then is a consolidation. So when I work with clients and do this, we've come up with 100 of those words, right? Well, we start to bucket them into similar ideas. Okay, these adjectives are all kind of pointing at the same idea. These adjectives are all pointing at the same idea. And then the more I look at it, some of these probably aren't that accurate anymore. We'll just throw those ones out. And then the distillation process becomes, there should be no more than 3 to 5 buckets, if you will, but figuring out kind of which of the adjectives in those spaces define the concept of that bucket best. And then maybe keeping 2 to 3 of the other words around just to help guide everyone that sees that first word know what it is you mean by that word. I'll give you an example of this in a second. But we want to consolidate all those brainstorming ideas down into a maximum of 3 to 5 categories, each defined by primary word, but then if you want, reuse some of those other adjectives to build up exactly that. And then the third and equally as important step is this idea about gut checking. Like, look back at that list before you go any further and start to say, okay, is this really who we are as a company, right? I didn't start this company just to make money. Started because something else drove me to do X, Y, Z. Are these things really, really true? Throw out anything that's really wish you were, but you know in your heart that you're not. It's aspirational. Like everybody else says they're that. So we should probably have that word on our list too. Like, Get rid of all that stuff that doesn't feel true, and you're going to skew that stuff back down to a sense where you're looking at things that are really unique to you. And we want these words not to be, perfect world. They're not the same generic core values that everybody has. They're not people. And, expecting that word to mean something meaningful to anyone that reads it. You want them as tailored. I told you about Locavores at the start, this fast casual place out of Alameda, Colorado. And when we worked with them on core values, this just gives you an example of that refined set of core values that they then did a gotcha, right? So when we worked through with them, what are all the reasons you're starting this company? What's important about it? What are you pointing towards? We got this spot. This is the end product of a lot of hard work. So I'm making it seem very simple here. But the idea is they settled in on these core ideas, right? Inspired this idea about being fresh, new, and unique and thriving. This was a fast casual place starting in a town that only has, Long John Silver's, McDonald's, and their really, really healthy food option down by the interstate is the Subway sandwich, right? So they wanted there to be this place that we're excited about going to see. They're really excited about being there. They're all about being local. They buy almost all of their food products from within 30 miles of Alameda, Colorado. And this idea about it being actually fresh food instead of fast food places. So those ended up being rising to the top as their 3 core values. But you'll see we use some of the other adjectives out of that brainstorm to help kind of buttress what those words mean to us. What does fresh mean? Well, it's kind of these ideas. It's nutritious and it's fresh, natural, and healthy. One of the things that can help guide you towards those core values, keep this in mind while you're writing all of them down. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Simon Sinek, sort of a business self-help guru that has now written 1 million books and talked everywhere and whatnot, and has some great ideas and some marginal ideas. This is one of his greatest ideas. The sense that all companies are working in this kind of golden circle where they're least unique pieces are on the outside and their most unique pieces are on the inside. So the outside ring of that circle is what you do, right? We're a software company. Well, great. That's good to establish. There's 100 bagillion software companies in the world. So that doesn't distinguish you much, but it does help, position you in the right space, right? That's what you do. The thing that starts to distinguish how you make yourself unique out in the market. It's the idea about how you do that, right? Okay, we're a software company, but we make accounting software and we, distribute it via an online platform that's, only ever used online. It's fully digital, remote, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, that's how we do our software product. So that narrows us down into a more unique space. But the key point of Simon Sinek's golden circle is this core center idea about why. Why is it that you do that, right? You're not running an accounting software online business just to make money. It hopefully was a right path. It would also make money, but you've got some core reasons there about why you're doing that. You experienced a problem you want to help people solve, and you're coming at it from this way. Just by the virtue of you being a human, you have come at this from some specific points of view. You've got some reasons. You might do some digging to find them. But what you want to do is make sure that your core values are a complete, accurate, full summary of this why. Why the hell are you here? What are you doing this business for? You could be doing a lot of other businesses. You're all smart people. Something puts you where you are, doing the thing you're doing. Why is that? The other side of your take-home quiz is the follow-up piece. Again, we're not going to do this here. But it builds a second really valuable brand foundation piece. Again, we're building these two pieces that make a platform. You can build everything else on top. This brand promise is a simple, hopefully 1-sentence, sometimes 2-sentence statement that is how you describe your company and what you do in a meaningful way, right? It's not going to surprise you when you hear me describe what needs to go into this. It can oftentimes be used as your elevator pitch, right? This is when people say, oh, you started a new company. Like, tell me about that. You've got this ready to rattle off, right? And it's also the thing you use to solidify, okay, right, this is what we do, and how and why. So it's a really simple fill in the blank. You've already thought about all these questions. It's trickier than that to get them all into one succinct sentence, but the basics are really straightforward. So don't overthink them. What do you do and how? We make software, and it's accounting software delivered digitally. That's your product, service. Who do you do it for? This is your audience. You are not allowed under any circumstances to say our audience is everyone. You know that's not true, and you know you can't make that true. So you'll be more successful the more specific you can be about who that audience is. And then the trickier one, how are you actually different? This should be a little bit easier if you've done the core values work, because you can look back at those and think, okay, this is what really drives us. Obviously, this is going to be what distinguishes us in space, right? So this is really your distinction. You know, what separates you. And of course, we're going for the shortest, most succinct version of it here, because we want this to be elevator speech-like. We also want it to be the simplest state possible, that all of us in the company, all the new employees later on, and even the customers can start to recite and understand what they've got to come, right? So I'll give you another example related to the locavores client we've been talking about. But you can literally put those words into this statement. You provide or offer or whatnot, whoever your audience is, with this thing in this special way. Again, I made that seem really simple. You'll have to do some wrangling with the words when you get there. I'll show you this example from upstairs. So this part was easy, right? Hopefully it's easy for you too. Locavores provides, and here's their audience. You can imagine from those core values, help us start to define who is it we're really aiming for. And so you see we've packed a lot into this description of our audience, but we want to get that as specific as possible, right? So they define their audience. Okay, it's all the people that are out taking their kids to soccer and football and volleyball practice, and they don't have a bunch of time, but they're tired of feeding Burger King to their kids every day. They want a healthier option, but they do not have time to make dinner at home. They do not have time to sit down at the Red Lobster in San Alameda, so they need an option. So that all gets defined down to this succinct statement about health-conscious families on the go. So we've actually packed a lot in there, but 3 key ideas: families, various people with different age groups in their household, health-conscious, and then active lifestyle and busy. So your audience can be defined in lots of ways. Just work as hard as you can to define it as clearly as possible. This does narrow down their audience quite a bit. Leaves out a variety of people that might come to eat there. Maybe those people still come to eat there, but this is who they're going to focus on when they talk about. And these are true to their core. This is who they want to focus on. These are the people they want to serve. And then straight out of those core values again, what do we provide and how? Technically, we provide food. You want to get picky. That's the what part of what they provide. This idea about fresh and inspired food, those are straight out of their core values. And then this idea about the fact that they deliver fresh food quickly is really that distinguishing point about what separates them, right? It's essentially fast food, but it's actually healthy. So that's how we got to the end point on that brand promise for a client like locavores. So on the backside of your worksheet, you'll see all of it's designed to help walk you through that process. So your take home is work through your core values. Let those guide you on working through your brand promise. By the time you've got core values and your brand promise, you're well on your way to really having a sense about guiding the rest of the process about how you communicate with the world. Comms, PR, logo, marketing, branding. So. Couple of things to keep in mind. At the risk of repeating myself, I'm going to repeat myself on a couple of key points. One, you can't be all things to all people. Do not try to do this. You don't want to do this. it'll cause you to chase your tail round and round and never catch it, right? You cannot focus on an audience of every. You need to have, even just from a tactical standpoint, you need to know who is it that we are communicating? Who do we really speak to? Those people are going to have the highest likelihood of our story resonating with them, but it also gives us focus on where to go. When you start thinking about, oh my God, we have to market to every human being on the planet. Well, like, where do you even start? You'll throw 20 cents at every last possible choice and it'll get you nowhere. So, you do not want, you don't even want this. It may seem like a good idea, but you don't want it. And the other thing I'd say is keep checking with yourself along the way about whether or not these pieces you're working on feel right in your gut. You need to feel like, yeah, we got it. That is us. We didn't leave any parts out. We didn't add anything in that we really aren't. We wish we were. Just keep making sure that, every third step or so along the way, you're doing a gut check and you're doubling back. And then let that brand be your guide. Believe it or not, you do those two things. Yeah, you've already got a brand. Look at you. You had a brand before, it just wasn't defined. Now you've got one defined. You've got these foundational pieces that can start you off. Use those core values, that brand promise, to guide visual branding, but also all of your business decisions, right? So this isn't just about, we use those words to make our logo. This is about are making a business decision. Does this choice align with our core values? You can literally use it to decide whether or not to hire more people here or acquire that company or sell off these parts or move into that different market. You should be able to use even these two core foundational brand pieces to help start guiding those decisions. Is this something that makes sense in the context of our brand promise? It's a fair question. Literally every business decision, Promise you'd see all of these, so I have to include the one about who you should hire to your design work. I decided not just to make a slide that said me. You could hire me. Hey, maybe you should hire me. More importantly, I understand as entrepreneurial-minded folks, all of us have this DIY sensibility, right? We can do this on our own, and I've given you some pieces you can take home and do on your own today. So I understand that mindset. I will tell you that, like hiring an accountant or an attorney or whatnot, there is value in bringing expertise to the table in this matter, right? So you can do some of those branding pieces on your own. But there can be a great deal of value in bringing in an outside firm, not the least of which is that they are able to bring in a little bit of an outside viewpoint, right? They can call BS on some things you're saying. They can say, these core values, we've talked a lot and I'm not seeing, you wrote these down, but I don't really believe them, but I do see you doing a lot of this. Maybe we should add that to the list on those pieces. So, I will encourage you along the way to hire a design firm. It isn't just me. And I want to give you a few take-home, can actually use these things at home, instructions about how I would recommend you go through that process, right? So, finding a design firm, I want to say it's relatively easy. You can do Google searches online and whatnot. You'll find a variety of places. In my experience, it's going to take a lot of work to sort down those options into something that makes sense of. That's true of almost anything you go shopping for on the internet anymore. More accurately, I would tell you, of course, go to your network. Start asking about good experiences people have had with branding consultants, design firms, freelance designers. See what their experiences were, and get that advice. And then one that lots of people don't often think about is this peers idea. That is going out in space and seeing people whose brands you really respect or trust that you didn't even think about before, and going to those companies and saying, hey, who did your branding for you? They don't have to be competitors. They don't have to be in the same industry or space. Just companies that are out in space that think, oh, that's I really respect what they're doing there. They did a great job building a story. It resonates with me. I'm going to find out who did that for them and start talking to that firm about doing that. I'd encourage you away from picking out design firms online because they do a bunch of stuff in a style that you happen to really like. While that may align with some of your core values, I think you want to look for designers and branding people that are always building work that's unique to each of their client's situation. I talked here today about distinguishing yourself. You don't want a design firm that builds really similar visuals for all 22 of their clients because you're going to get visuals just like that. And the chance of that being accurate to who you are relatively. After you've found one or more, I'm going to encourage you to interview those design firms. Almost any consultant, freelancer, design firm is going to be willing to sit down with you, ideally for free, tell you more about themselves, hear about your goals, needs, whatnot. I would say you do not need to feel like you have to come to the table for those interviews with a list of the things that you need or a formal RFP or the like. Be willing to show up at those meetings and say, here's the current situation we're in. Here's what we do have. Here's what our goals are. And use some of their expertise to start filling in those holes. Okay, they're going to be able to tell you maybe some things you hadn't even thought about in terms of, okay, as we see it, the first most critical pieces are actually here, here, and here. And you showed up and said, I need a trifold brochure. But as we talk to you about your situation, maybe you really do need to focus a lot of energy over here on social media or redo your logo so it accurately represents whatever those use case scenarios are. But don't feel like you need to show up and say, okay, I'm interviewing you because we need a logo and we need a trifold brochure and we need a website. Just show up with them and tell them where your goals are, where you're headed, what you've got, and use some of their expertise to walk through that process. You certainly want to look for people that do have expertise in branding. I'd encourage you to look for people that can tell you some about their creative process for gleaning some of those key why pieces out. One of the real values of hiring a professional in the design and branding space can be their ability to sort of dig way down deep in a space that maybe you didn't even get to when you did the worksheet and glean some of those pieces. And if they can tell you more about that process in a way that makes you think, oh, yeah, I see how you might get even more out of me than I was able to on my own. And then realistically, personality fit may be the most important out of all of these. Ideally, this is the person or firm you're going to be working with pretty closely, hand in hand for a long period of time on some stuff that's very close to the core of the company. And you definitely want to have a sense that you're going to have a rapport, a good relationship with these people. You don't have to go out and be drinking buddies, but you do want to enjoy working with them. You want to enjoy where they come from. I hate to say it, but you might weigh that over the expertise they're bringing to the table in terms of showing you a portfolio. This is going to be a key fight about working. Last but not least, you're certainly going to have to budget some for a design firm, unless you have a super good friend who's really good at branding and design and is willing to give it to you for free. God bless you. What you don't want to do is show up at a design firm and say, how much for branding? I think I've already discussed. Branding means 10,000 different things. It's a lot like showing up at a house builder and saying, I want a house. How much for a house? And making them give you an answer for how much a house costs. Obviously, there's a lot of factors involved, right? So definitely what you want to do is discuss scope. If you know what your budget can be, you can discuss that with them. But this goes back to my point from before. Sit down and talk with them about what your goals are, and they can start to help. They know what they're doing. They can start to help fill in the gaps. Okay, maybe you need these 8 things, but really the first phase are these 2 critical pieces. Let's do those 2. And then, 3 to 6 months later, these are a little less critical. We've got a little more budget. We've got some revenue coming in. Maybe we do those. But start to talk about the scope of what you need. But I would encourage you to address that with them as a sense more about your goals than about showing up and saying, we need a trifold. Design is the spot where there's a whole bunch of price points all across the board. This isn't always true, but I found it to be relatively true in the design space. This idea about you get what you pay for. There is value in people that have expertise in design and branding. And it tends to be a pretty straight line in our industry that as you move up in expertise in design and branding, the rates go up. And so there's pretty one-to-one correlation about get what you pay for. That's not always true, but just the idea that that tends to hold relatively true in the design and branding space. And then, don't take my word for it, the U.S. Small Business Administration recommends that small businesses set aside 7 to 10% of their annual gross revenue for design, marketing, branding purposes. Should ask everyone in the room that's doing that to because it's probably zero.
Right.
But that is the recommendation from the SBA. Certainly, I know it's always hard to make those expenses, but we are, in a space where there's some oftentimes good return on investment for those kinds of things. I tend to recommend this same range for startup companies that are building a budget for the startup of their company. Imagine if you're building that all-in budget for what's it going to take us to get through first 12 months. Make sure 7 to 10% of that budget is branding and design. It's going to be critical at that stage. All that to say, Scrooge McDuck says, good design is good business. I would tell you branding is one of the cheapest ways you can differentiate your company and consequently accelerate sales. I hope I'm continuing to draw a direct line between those two things. Branding is only here to accelerate sales and growth. I come from a mindset that the only reason you should be investing in design and branding is for that ROI. It's a very business-minded approach. Design can get a bad rep because it comes from the spot. It's also very aesthetic and creative, but I can't think of a good reason why you would pay someone way too much money to be just aesthetic and creative with your business when you actually need that to pay off for you. So the way I come at it is good design is worth investing in because it is good business. You should only be investing in design if you expect it to have a bottom line effect on business. So from the first moment someone knows that you're selling a product or food or a service or whatnot, you're building equity in your brand, like it or not, even if there's nothing really showing there. It's kind of the leftovers if you haven't put some thought into it before you get there. And if you do your branding right the first time, it'll pay dividends way higher than, of course, having to do a do-over later on, digging yourself back out of that fish. I'm a little bit OCD, so I told you got all the where, why, when, what, how, so I had to put where in there because I wasn't able to leave it out. Obviously, you could chat with me, but my hope today is that you're understanding branding and positioning a little bit better. You've got a good sense of the important role that they play in making your company stand out. But to that point, I want to reiterate this idea. All of us humans are emotional creatures. All of us crave experiences that speak to us emotionally, not just intellectually, not just feature benefit, not just how does your product solve the problem, but tell me the story around that. Get me emotionally captivated. Give me something compelling to hook my brain into so that I start to think about your company. I would tell you great branding often encourages consumers to make that first leap of faith. They're randomly standing at the store, whether it's virtually in front of 20 software products, one of them's yours, or physically in front of 20 kinds of beer. They need something to help them think, okay, great, I'm going to take a leap of faith on this one. So hold on. Knowing that I probably will not have answered all of your questions, that I am still a guy you can turn to if you have questions about branding. I'd be happy to answer any of them here in a Q&A. And get contact information always around on the social medias, email, and phone. If you've got questions afterwards, I'd be happy to chat.
Question about the value stuff. So at what point do you start collecting data to determine whether those values are actually going to resonate with your audience? Because I wouldn't want to be developing a value system for my product until I know someone's actually going to pay money for that value system. So I'm wondering, like, at what point do you say, hey, enough of the talking about five values and being more, like, let's test this and see if there's an actual customer who wants to purchase this?
I'm super, super glad you asked that question. Thank you. I wish I had planted you in the audience to ask that question, so I remembered to say that. I will give you $20 later for your service and some free sandwiches, courtesy of Marigold 111. You don't. If you ask me, you don't. I would tell you never compromise on those core values based on what you think is going to sell in the marketplace. I would tell you long term, you are always going to be more successful and perhaps more importantly, more happy if you are true to the core of what you're doing rather than trying to bend yourself to the whim of what the market says it wants, right? I don't believe in most focus grouping. I don't believe in a lot of double checking things with audiences. People love to throw out the statement about how the fact that the iPhone would never exist if they focus grouped this concept, everyone would have thought, I don't know what that thing is, but it seems kind of stupid and it's totally unfamiliar to me. I'm totally uninterested. I think people don't exactly know what they want, but I also think that you want to build a company whose brand is true to who you and the company are, and you want to find people that resonates with, and those are your customers.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's not a highly popular opinion. I would say when you go into marketing, which is not what I do a whole different presentation on how branding is not marketing. When you start going into marketing and advertising, I think you want to spend some more energy in that space. Like, okay, here's who we are, but how do we message that along with maybe feature benefit to some different audiences? How do we tweak our messaging so that it resonates a little more with audience? But in my world, I think that should be saved for the marketing advertising side, not the core branding work.
So I guess so you're separating who I am against how I'm selling who I am. You're saying that you can change the marketing to get to an audience, but the core itself shouldn't change.
I think that's right.
Okay.
I will just reiterate that the marketing should still be true to those core values that are guiding your company, and it should still be pointed only at those audiences that you're starting to define early on, as opposed to deciding that this is who we are at our core, but now we're going to just sell to everybody.
Right.
Because if you're staying true to who you are at your core, you're not going to appeal to everyone. You're leaving business on the table per se, but realistically you aren't. It feels like you are, but the reality is if you don't resonate with a certain percentage of the audience that comes to you because of that resonation, you're not going to get any. So yes, what you said I would agree with. You start shifting that message based on what might resonate better only when you get to that kind of marketing advertising point.
You did a good job of explaining why you're a design firm. I feel like, at least for me, small businesses or startups, when we're still being scrappy, the common other alternative, which is cheaper but could be a mistake. So I'm wondering, what is the mistake to using a design firm versus like defining your brand promise and core values yourself and then outsourcing with freelancers through like Fiverr or something, which will be cheaper, but you're saying it's one-to-one, you get what you pay for. What is the biggest mistake by doing it that cheaper route versus working with a design firm for beyond?
Yeah, the simple answer is that sort of one-to-one, get what you pay for ratio is mostly about experience. And so what happens is all the people that are kind of almost giving away their services on Fiverr or 99 Designs or whatnot, they aren't coming at design from how to accurately and clearly convey this brand, these core values in a logo. They're coming at design from how do I slap 20 pretty things together and get them in front of the client so that the client thinks, ooh, neat, shiny, and just grabs one of them and goes. And the pitfall there can be that it's easy for all of us. I mentioned we're emotional creatures. It's easy for all of us to get trapped down that path, right? Something appeals to you aesthetically, and all of a sudden you think, "Ooh, that's our logo," because I love purple, and they gave me a purple option. Done. that was awesome, and I only paid $9 for it. The reality is, it tends to be that the more experienced designers and brand consultants have in the space, the more ability they have to work with you on, okay, every piece of design we build for you needs to be based off of who you are at your core. So either that design firm's going to work with you to help define who you are at your core, or they're going to take the work you've done, trust that it's relatively accurate, and at least build off of that. You know, when I design logos, the idea is always, let's take the core values. How do we build a visual logo that actually conveys every one of these core values, right? That's how we know it's successful. Not when we get to a spot that's like, oh, cool, that, made an awesome dragon. But instead, does it convey even abstractly these core values? So that's probably where the price comes in. So you can, if you know to look for that, you can ease your way in at a lower price point, but hold your designer's feet to the fire. You don't just make me pretty stuff. We're working at conveying these core values. So that's one way kind of out of that trap. Sure.
What if a company, I'm kind of in the middle of rebranding my business. Do you find it can hurt small businesses when you're looking at rebranding?
Say the question again.
So I'm in the middle of rebranding my business. When I started, it was just something I came up with on my own, and I feel like a little bit more, ability to copyright and all this.
Right.
So have you seen rebranding helping or hurting small businesses?
Usually helping, and it sounds like in your case, more often than not, because, what it won't surprise you to hear me say, put some of these things in your mind as you rebrand. It can always be, especially if you feel like you're headed down the wrong path with a current brand, you're clearly already feeling like it's not accurate anymore. And it maybe misses some of the tactical things you need. Like, I need it to be actually fully unique to me so I can trademark it. But, sooner the better on that rebrand to get it as true to your core as you can so that you're putting that accurate, clear representation of the company out into the world as quickly as possible. So, yeah, I think whether it's a brand new brand for a startup company or a rebrand, I would tell you the value's essentially the same. Like, move into that space as quickly as possible and, take your authentic self out to the market.
To go back to the first question originally, as brand is like a intangible, kind of amorphous thing. That being said, you're saying there's good brands and bad brands. And he was kind of asking about data on how to track it. So, there's got to be some type of like KPI that you're looking at on what distinguishes a good brand to a bad brand. Because when you talked about like what does and doesn't, you would say it more abstractly relates, but then like in those words right there, like abstractly, like so, like what actual tangible things do you measure for what a good brand versus a not brand is? Either input or output.
Yeah, I probably should have had this question planted too, because it's the one I don't have an answer for. The blessing and the curse of the industry I work in is that we don't have that number, right? When you're the size of Coca-Cola, you can pay a bunch of consultants to tell you what the dollar value of your brand is. And the consultants come back after you paid them $10 million and say, your brand's worth $33 billion. Wow, that's pretty important. For all of us, we don't have the resources to do that. And so the unfortunate part of that is I have to stand here and admit to you, from an objective, data-driven standpoint, there isn't that number, right? We can say we rebranded and we use those core values to guide all of our business decisions, to guide our visual identity, to guide how we market to people, and sales went up. But there's no possible way that I can say, well, the branding firm is responsible for 87.4% of that revenue growth, right? So I wish I had a better answer for you. It's sort of the Achilles heel of working in space and caring a lot about doing something that brings dollars value to companies, but there isn't really an objective measure. So I really wish I had that answer for you, for my sake, Andrew.
I mean, is there anything you look at, like, not it's like an objective, like 87, but like what things would you look at to decide whether it's needs to be changed or not? Because I think there's, like, for example, she's going to rebrand, she has a brand, and you're saying my brand's going to be better. And she says, well, how do I know? And I just know because I've experienced, like, at that point, like, it's not really a great selling point. So there's got to be something you look at, whether, not necessarily it's exact math, but, what do you look at in general?
Yeah.
I mean, that is the scary part of this
Right.
rebrand. I have a very great logo and it's a very attractive one and audience have liked it. But on a legal standpoint, I need to be able to progress to trademark or safety networks for my own business.
Right.
Which means I need unique.
This won't surprise you. What I'm going to tell you is none of my measures are objective. I just admitted that to you before. They're all subjective about looking at a brand and whether or not it feels true to that company. Like, are they just the focus that it brings to a company? And the most tactical way this happens is this: who are we to what specific audience piece? What I've seen, again, is a subject measurement. Sales process gets a lot easier if you know who you are, stay true to that, and you're selling to the people that you know that's going to resonate with. So all of a sudden, all the sales funnel process just gets smoother. By what objective measure? Unknown.
Yeah.
Right? So, again, for the sake of my career, I wish I had a better answer for you.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, like, sorry, everyone, just, so like you're going to pay whoever, if Coca-Cola was going to pay whoever $10 million to do that, what would they look at? Like, what do they go to, like, what does the industry, maybe not you specifically, but what would the industry say, like, do they interview 100 people and say, like, yeah, they kind of feel this way? Or
Right.
it'd still be fine, right?
Right. Yeah, I think even when McKinsey is charging $10 million to do that, most of what they're doing is subjective surveying, right? They go out in the market and start to say, okay, we interviewed these people and we got all these answers, and 42% of them said this. The full market is worth this much. So 42% of that's here. So there's a couple of numbers, but most of it's based on subjective feedback they're getting from a swath of potential consumers.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you just ask your friends and people and clients, like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And you just try to take feedback from it?
Yeah, certainly I would do that. You just have to make sure, I do this a lot with even clients. You have to remind them the space they're in each time, right? You're not evaluating this based on necessarily whether or not you just think it's a good brand. So you have to be careful when you ask your friends and family, is this a good brand? Because they're going to answer, if I love dragons and it's logo of dragon, I'm going to say yes. But they're not basing that answer on whether or not that brand's actually a really true, clear, authentic guiding point for your company based on your core